Welcome to the 18th season of the Nitwits, a weekly roundtable discussion on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Our Nitwits panel includes Neil Riddell of the Altoona Mirror, Mark Brennan of FightOnState.com, Jacob Cowker of WTAJ Sports, and a special guest Nitwit each week. The Nitwits are brought to you by Irwin Financial Raymond James, an independent firm and firm foundation for your financial future. Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Reed and Cellini, Doctors Reed and Cellini provide orthodontics for children and adults. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona, just ask rental. Buy what you want, rent what you need. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your cleaning needs. By Your Rehab Choice, Health South Altoona, ask for us by name. By Courtesy Motors of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By The Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday.
Well, Penn State's on the wrong side of history this week. The Nittany Lions fall 27-10 to Temple. The first loss to the Owls in 74 years. Here to break it all down are Neil Riddell from the Altoona Mirror, Fight on State's Mark Brennan, the captain, Mike Irwin, and I am your host, Jacob Cowker. Neil, where do you even begin with this stunner?
Yeah, it was like, Jake, you're the teacher, and I want to go, ooh, ooh, ooh. Let me talk.
Mr. Connor.
Wow. I think you got to really call into the question this coaching staff's performance in the off season with a quarterback that everybody thinks has a real good chance to go high in the draft or maybe at the top of the draft, to not be ready for all this blitzing. It just doesn't appear that they're comfortable with their schemes, what they're teaching. This offensive line has played long enough that it should have been much, much better. This was one of the most disappointing Penn State performances in memory.
Yeah, since a Northwestern game last year, right? I mean, the thing is, I think people are taking that a little bit too far. That was a brutal game against Northwestern, but it's unbelievable. It's like the offensive staff here has no plan B. When have we seen them come out and adjust at halftime and then come out and just be a completely and again, as you mentioned, Neil, coming off of an offseason where you knew everybody was going to try to test the O-line, you knew everybody was going to try to test Parrish Palmer, no plan B at all. I give the defensive staff a little bit of a pass because they lost arguably their best player and then a couple other linebackers, so you could see why that happened. But with respect to the offense, there are some real questions about this offensive coaching staff now. They have to be asked.
You know, the first thing I think we should do is give credit to Matt Roll and his coaches down at Temple, because I think they definitely outcoached, Penn State in this game. And really, I was surprised. I know when we made all our picks last week, Temple was a 7-point underdog. And I thought, what do they talk about? I thought Penn State would just go out and annihilate. I thought it'd be a 20-point spread or something like that. But then you go on a bit back. They went right back to their old offense. And I don't know what they were doing all winter long. They said they were working an extra 4 hours a week on their offensive blocking, and they were terrible. I mean, 10 sacks. I don't know if that's a new record for Penn State.
They don't list it in the media guide.
Okay, but 10 sacks. I mean, last year there were 44 all year. 10 the first game. I mean, they're on schedule to have 120 sacks this year. But, I criticize the offensive coaches from Penn State. I mean, Donovan and Hand is the offensive line coach, because it doesn't seem like they know what they're doing out there. I mean, they're totally frustrated and don't really have any order in what they're doing out there.
Well, you mentioned Palmer, and to me, I mean, they made a movie called The Blind Side. So they bring in a heavily decorated JUCO, and they put him at left tackle. And I think that's probably asking too much of him. Nelson is considered your, maybe your best lineman. Why not slide him over to left tackle and try Palmer at right tackle? It'll be curious this week because most of the time we've sit here and said, okay, it's one loss. Let's take a step back and not overreact. Well, I think everybody needs to react here. We're going to see what kind of changes they're capable of this week.
When you talk about the offensive line, though, listen, he says they have their 5 best offensive linemen out there. Think about what their best drive was last year. Wasn't it the end of the Ohio State game when Donovan Smith was out and there were 5 guys who were on this team, not including Paris Palmer, who were part of that line? Now, I'm not saying Paris Palmer's not the ultimate answer, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have given him a shot, but you have to have a plan B. And you can't let one guy get exploited over and over and over again and not have a different plan to go to there, if nothing else, to save your quarterback and to save that kid's confidence.
Yeah, on a couple of different plays, I actually timed it out with our video, and you can see from the moment the ball begins the snap, which everybody's going to react even a little bit after that, to the time when Christian Hackenberg is initially hit, sometimes as short as 2 seconds, less than 2 seconds. I mean, that's nowhere near enough time to do anything with the ball.
But, if you look back, the Pinstripe Bowl, they played really well that day, and it looked like Hackenberg was getting rid of the ball quicker and they were blocking better. But I don't know, Hackenberg was like a deer in headlights back there this time. I mean, I don't know what happened. He's losing all his confidence, and they better be careful. They're going to lose all confidence in what they're doing out there.
Well, I wonder, continuing on the offensive line, Laurent played against Ohio State. They brought Reiner in, who's a senior. Now, fine, you're not going to play him maybe this week, last week. But if there's problems that persist against Buffalo, I'm wondering whether you're going to throw these guys in there sooner than later. And if not, why would you bring in a Reiner for 1 year?
Well, maybe they were thinking with Paris Palmer that you get past Temple, because Temple, listen, and Mike, you're right. I mean, Temple did have a good defense last year, number 4 in the nation in scoring defense, had good pass rushers. But maybe they were thinking you get Paris Palmer in there, they hopefully survive Temple, and then you have a stretch where maybe he can get comfortable. But clearly that wasn't happening, and I can't fathom how you can give up 10 sacks in a game. I cannot even fathom how there's no adjustment made personnel-wise to prevent that from happening.
But their play calling was poor.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't throw many passes down or over the middle. I mean, I think there were 11 passes that he completed, and it was all these just quick outs.
Well, when you get 2 seconds to pass, like Jake said.
And a tight end they didn't throw to a tight end all day. Nobody down the middle. They left the tight end in the block. I guess they weren't blocking because
they had to.
Temple was doing it with a 3-man rush at times.
A 2-man rush once.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems is the offensive line, their first couple steps are dropping right back. And these guys are penetrating and running right around them. I mean, I think they ought to be maybe a little more aggressive on the line of scrimmage.
Well, I wonder about, Brock Ewart did the game, and I think he made some excellent points about, he was a backup to Peyton Manning, and they kept max protection. That even if you had to only send 2 guys out, you have to protect a quarterback like this. And it just doesn't seem like this staff is embracing things like that, maybe playing with a fullback and whatnot. This kid needs help.
One other thing, how do they not see this coming? Listen, we know how good that Penn State front 7 is and probably was before the injury. So they're going against these guys. So it's not as if they're going against stiffs. They're playing against Zettel and Johnson, and we saw what Nassib brought, and the linebackers are quick. How did they not see this coming in the preseason? You kind of scratch your head. And again, I go back to it. How do you not have a plan B? When you go into a game like this, after the season you had last year, how do you not have a plan B?
What is their running game? I mean, they have Akil Lynch in the back. He's the only guy back there. And Hackenberg is not a runner. I mean, he's a passer, so he doesn't have that dimension where he's going to run outside. I mean, he fakes it or he hands it off to Akil Lynch, but that's their running play. They only showed probably about a dozen plays altogether.
A jet sweep, too. I mean,
that made me laugh. Last year, they had us begging for mercy with this bubble screen that they played. They didn't do any of that yesterday. Now they're running this jet sweep. Okay, it worked great for the first couple times, but then they kept going to the well.
All right, well, we've just begun to dissect this loss here on the Nitwits. You can add some injury to insult from this Temple game, and Mark hit on it earlier. Penn State losing a key piece of its defense for the rest of 2015. Now the question is, who will step up, and what's this mean for the D heading forward? We'll tackle that in just a bit.
The Nitwits are brought to you by Irwin Financial Raymond James, an independent firm and firm foundation for your financial future. Coldwell Banker, No one will work harder to sell your home. By Doctors Reed and Solani, orthodontics for children and adults. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona. Just ask rental. Buy what you want, rent what you need.
Hi, my name is Wally Richardson, former Penn State quarterback, and you're watching the Nitwits.
Well, thank you very much, Wally. Philadelphia native Naeem Wortman-White called the homecoming a true blessing just days before Penn State went to the link to play Temple. That dream turned into a nightmare. The middle linebacker hurting his leg in the loss to the Owls, officially done for the year. It's a big blow to this Penn State defense.
Yeah, and Mark mentioned it last week about how he was evolving into the signal caller. That was really a shame. I thought the defense played tremendous the first 4 series, and then they kind of gradually wore down. Bell was a big loss in that game. He was playing excellent, I thought.
Yeah, to me, Wortman-White that's every bit as important as losing Hackenberg if they were to do it on the other side. Knock on wood that they don't. But for a guy who's in there calling all those plays, and then Wooten, I just don't think he's up to that kind of level yet. I don't want to be overly critical of a backup player who they weren't really expecting to be that guy. But, he's up there making the calls. He's doing pre-snap adjustments. And I don't think it was a coincidence that, listen, he ends up being hurt on that punt play. They get a quick turnover. The offense can't do anything with it. And then all of a sudden, Temple comes back, marches right down the field, and that was no coincidence at all. That was a huge loss for them, and your heart goes out to the kid because you hate to see anybody, go down with that sort of injury game 1 of the year or any time.
Yeah, he was really the quarterback of that defense. I mean, I think he was the one everybody was looking for, the leadership and to handle the play or the defensive play calling and everything. And for him to go out like that and be out for the season, now I guess they had to burn a couple red shirts for a couple of freshman guys, Jake Cooper and Manny Bowen or something like that.
Yeah, those two.
And so then Wooten had stepped in, but I don't think he's a Wortman-White yet.
Made a couple plays. He made a good play down at the goal line. He was around the ball some, but he was also they became a little softer in the middle in the second half.
Well, they have decisions to make now because I don't know. It didn't look like he's going to be the answer there. And again, I don't want to come across as being negative toward him because they weren't expecting that. So now, do you move a Kabinda over? You're not able to do that in the middle of a game because of the play calling responsibilities. But can they afford to try to move a Kabinda over and hope somebody else could fill in as an outside backer? I think it's a lot to ask of Cooper to come in there and try to do it. They have some tough decisions to make at that position. So again, your heart goes out to the kid, but from a practical standpoint, that's a tough loss for the team.
Can they bring Lucas closer to the football?
Well, they did. They have. They played a lot of nickel and dime, and they've been playing a lot of nickel and dime. But that still isn't going to take over the guy who's there calling the plays and making the adjustments.
Now, Mark, you asked after the game about why or what you want the starters on special teams.
That up for?
Hindsight's always 20/20. It is, but I went back and looked, and there were only 2 starters on that punt team. I mean, outside of the punter, and one of them was one of the protectors, who's probably not going to. And Wortman-White was up there, basically initially as a blocker and then getting downfield. And yeah, hindsight's 20/20. But I really have to wonder if the guy's that important to your defense. Is he the guy that you want there blocking on punts?
I think it's a fair question. On the other hand, when they don't put enough starters on those units and you get lit up for something, everybody's screaming for, because Mike Hull, I think, was out there just about every play.
Yeah, but I guess my point is you have to take into account the value that he brings when he's in there playing. A different linebacker could have easily done that same sort of thing, being one of the basically linemen on the punt play.
How about,
probably outside of Zettel, he'd be the only key guy that really you'd lose on defense and really could cause
Austin
problems.
Johnson.
And Johnson. I mean, they're the 3 stars. Well, then a couple defensive backs.
I mean, there's a lot. But that's because he calls the plays. I mean, it's huge.
So I didn't think the defensive ends played particularly well in containment. I mean, that Thomas got outside a couple times, and the linebackers. I don't know the outside linebacker. All that I agree with Neil. I thought Bell played well, but Nassib and Sickles getting to the outside a couple times. Thomas outran him to the sidelines.
He did on the touchdown. Plays. The kid made a great run. It was interesting to me that Zettel and Johnson weren't in the game on 3rd down when it was 10-0 when the kid busted that draw down to the 2. But I thought NASA played a great game.
Well, I think Mike makes a good point, though. Both of those guys are first-year starters, and I think they're both going to be really good. NASA did play an outstanding game, but there were a couple times where there are things that you can see that he and Sickles are both going to learn from, where they are not going to allow that containment to break the next time. And I think overall they're going to be just fine as the season goes along.
Well, I know he got to the quarterback a few times, but
10
then
tackles.
If you're going in to get the quarterback and you forget about that guy sweeping the end.
That's how you
They
learn.
had
pitch out or
15 tackles for loss. Usually you win a game like that.
Yep.
And again, I mean, that all goes back to when you can't protect your own quarterback. And it's just one of those things where you can't overcome so many of the core deficiencies. You know, it's one of those things where at some point the bottom line is the bottom line.
Yeah, and I think you look at the punting game. He's got to be Pasquarelli. He's got to be a little more consistent. They had a chance to maybe pooch it down inside the 10 a couple times.
Yeah, I thought he
give
was
the
good
defense a
early.
break,
You know, and then I go back and you look at the stats after Franklin mentioned it, and you know, as the game went along, and that's the other thing. You know, as the pressure amps up, they needed somebody to make a play, need somebody to come through, and nobody was able to do it.
All right, well, we will dig into the other side. You know, if it's 50% or 75% the glass empty, it's got to be at least 25% full. We'll take a look at the positives and we'll dig deeper. We'll each come up with one, I guess. I guess we'll each have to come up with one. Can we do it? We'll find out when we come back.
The Nitwits, a roundtable discussion of Penn State football.
The Nitwits are brought to you by Monarch Cleaners for all your cleaning needs. By your rehab choice, Health South Altoona. Ask for us by name. By Courtesy Motors of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By the Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life.
Now back to the Nitwits. A roundtable discussion of Penn State football.
We're about 75% into the show. I feel like that's a fair enough time to at least reach for some positives from this loss. Let's start with Mike on what maybe the bright side that you take away.
Okay. Well, a couple of bright spots I thought Akil Lynch played well. I mean, he ran a touchdown, and I don't know how many opportunities he had. He had 78 yards and 10 carries, so he averaged 7.8 yards per carry. He did pretty well. And the freshman that had to reverse early, Polk, that ran around, I thought he did a good job. So we didn't really get a chance to see a lot of those freshmen. I mean, they didn't really do a lot of substitution in there. I mean, I think maybe they'll look down the road, they'll use some more people, but we didn't really have an opportunity to see too many new faces in there.
I'll throw out a couple because I know Brendan probably has about 8 he's sitting on. Farmer, I thought did a good job as the kickoff returner, stuck his nose in there, plowed for extra yards. And Julius, I think, was a good, debut. And it was, he hit the field goal, and he also, if you watch his kickoffs, it's almost like he's such a big guy. It's almost like he's hitting a sand wedge. If he really whips his leg through there, I think he's going to boom it out of the end zone consistently.
Yeah, I really don't. I mean, the thing that I would say is, hey, I'm from State College, and it was nice to see Matt Rule do really well. But from Penn State's perspective, other than what you guys have said, I did like Farmer. I mean, to think that guy was playing linebacker, clearly just a really good athlete, bowled a kid over. And I do think you're seeing the improvement in overall team speed. I mean, Polk is a great example of that. Tompkins, we didn't get to see quite as much. Saquon Barkley played. He looked like he was a little out of his element out there, so I'm not sure how positive that was. But overall, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure there's 25% good coming out of that game. There was some good, but not 25% to me.
I'll cap it off, I guess, now that you've taken all the best ones. I think Carl Nassib, not just from a performance point, but also the story that this is his first ever varsity football start at any level. The kid never even started in high school. To do it just a few miles down the road from where you grew up and have 10 tackles and be fairly productive. I think Mark brought up, I think that was a fair point, that early on the defense played well. And that's when you saw maybe Nassib and Sickles play their best. But I think that there's definitely something to build on from those two guys moving forward.
Yeah, you know, one thing that I forgot was John Reed starting. You know, as Franklin said afterward, you know, he and Campbell, true freshman, he and Campbell filled in for Haley. Didn't think they were really exploited. To come into that, I mean, a Philly kid, you talk about a local kid, true freshman coming in and starting at corner, he did a nice job there. So I was remiss so that was a real positive to me.
Had a few.
I had to struggle a little bit.
All right, well, let's stick with the letter P. When we return, we'll go from positives to predictions and reveal. I guess we probably already know who the Nitwit of the Week is. Maybe we can get a judge to overturn it, though. We've got Judge Berman on the phone when we come back.
The Nitwits are brought to you by EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State game day every Friday.
All right, it's prediction time as Buffalo comes to Beaver Stadium. Mike, what do you see for Saturday?
Well, Buffalo, they won over the weekend. They beat Akron 52 52 to 14 or something like that. I don't know a whole lot about Buffalo, and I'm sure Penn State's going to know a lot more than I'm going to know. I think their all-time record against Buffalo is like 1-1. But since we didn't
Wait a second. We're not talking about the Bills. That's Mike's favorite. The Bills drafted Mike.
I was in Buffalo for
Just give us your pick.
Pagula doesn't own this team.
Since it didn't work last week, I'm going to use it again this week. I'm going to say Penn State 28, Buffalo 7.
I'll go next. I can't pick Buffalo to cover. I mean, they played Duquesne and St. Francis. With all due respect to those schools, they played Albany this weekend. They fired their coach halfway to the middle of the year last year. I'm going to say Penn State 32, Buffalo 7.
The one issue that I think you have to worry about is there a hangover from that loss, and is it going to last? You know, I don't know that it will. You know, an old coach used to say you're never as bad as you look when you lose, and you're never as good as you look. I think that may be the case here. I think they may be a little bit better than they showed. I'll go Penn State 35, Buffalo 12.
35-12. Man, you guys are making me do math. Again, this is one of those things where it's almost like, what do you even expect from Penn State, much less an opponent that is kind of off the beaten path? So I think to throw a dart at the board as I'm doing the math in my head, which I'm terrible at,
15, 82,
we'll go,
16, 34.
we'll go
Penn
State 28, Buffalo 13. And hopefully I haven't done anything that makes the math terrible when we're trying to figure out Nitwit of the Week next week. This one's
the most important
This
thing.
is the first time he's ever longer than Mike on his prediction.
This week's, as we take a look at the standings, this one's pretty easy to figure
I
out.
would have my calculator next week. So
there was no winner. The deflated ball is not only the story of the NFL news cycle this week, it's also the story of the Nitwit cycle.
It's been our story for years now. We've had it long before Tom Brady did.
All right, well, that'll do it for this week of the Nitwits. We will talk to you next time after Penn State takes on Buffalo. See you then.
The Nitwits are brought to you by Irwin Financial Raymond James, an independent firm and firm foundation for your financial future. Coldwell Banker, no one will work harder to sell your home. By Reed and Salaney, Doctors Reed and Salaney provide orthodontics for children and adults. By Fiore True Value on 6th Avenue, Altoona. Just ask rental. Buy what you want, rent what you need. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your cleaning needs. By Your Rehab Choice, Health South Altoona. Ask for us by name. By Courtesy Motors of Altoona, where courtesy means a great deal. By The Allegro, where fine cuisine is a way of life. By EasyToUse.com, your Yellow Pages connection in print and online. By FightOnState.com, as close as you get to Penn State football without putting on a helmet. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State game day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Sunday. You can also see the Nitwits on AltoonaMirror.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next week.